Electric Cafe.
Hey everybody, welcome back to Electric Cafe. Today's video is going to be an album review on James Bernard's 1994 album called Atmospherics. Here's the original CD here, and then just recently got reissued for the 30th anniversary. Here's the original copy of the vinyl as well, and here is the new box set. Well, it's almost like a box set. It's a four-piece record. Basically, what they did was they kept the original album together on two records, and then what they did special for the record 3 and 4 was they had San Francisco ambient dub and dub techno producer BV Dub do his own renditions of the album and sort of together do it as a nice package. I've yet to hear the BV Dub versions. Maybe another time I'll review that. That'll be interesting, but I haven't got a chance to check it out. But they did a nice job with the packaging on the label that did this. I think it was Past, Future, and Present Records. I think they're called. So they definitely did a good job with the reissue. This recently just came out last month. I think roughly the 4x12 sold for like $53 or somewhere around there. I think there's 200 copies. They're also doing it on the reissue on double CD and also double cassette. But I'm going to just review the original. It's my history with James Bernard goes back quite a few years. I remember in 1991 and 1992, I was heavily got into Rising High Records. It was High Records is one of my favorite '90s techno, ambient, chill out, and trance labels of all time. And I can't tell you how many copies I have of or different releases I have from their label, from their excellent compilations to their trance series to their um, to them pressing other people's music as well that were on other labels. They just did a fantastic job. Casper Pound was really instrumental in bringing lot of, again, great trance, techno, and ambient chill out music to America. Rising High was probably one of the most important labels of the early 90s in America, and probably even more so in some ways in Germany and in UK. But because of the lack of electronic music in 91 to 93, maybe as far as like deeper electronic music, it was super important. Um, just tons of legendary techno tracks and EPs and artists on there. Everybody from Wagon Christ to James Bernard to um, geez, all kinds of people, Hard Floor and Bedouin Ascent, and just so many great producers and great electronic artists I would follow for the next decade, if not more, and collect their music. And over the course of the '90s, and then started going into the internet, um, into my first days on the internet, in probably like 1997 and Netscape. Um, I'm dating myself. Netscape. Web browser, and just after American Online, that was probably like the web choice of, or the browser of choice in 96, 97, 98, maybe even 99, Netscape. um, and then but yeah, I first started, like, once I had access to the internet in like 96, 97, I started browsing the internet and finding music from labels that I already knew and sort of filling in the missing gaps. And one of those big labels was Rising High. And then I really started to collect it as I started buying music online in the later 90s, maybe 98, 99. And then Discog started in 2001. And probably by the time 2002, 2003 had happened, I pretty much, for the most part, finished buying all the music that I sort of heard about and was really starting to just follow in the early 90s, and probably by 2003, 2004, I pretty much bought all of what I wanted from the 90s music as far as all I knew. I mean, there was been some stuff here and there I've probably found in maybe a decade after that, up to like maybe like 2014. But for the most part, some of my most favorite, labels like Instinct Ambient and Emit Records and Rising High and, um, Pod Communications, Hard House Records, IQ Records. I could just Warp Records. I could just go on and on and on. Apollo Records, RNS. Just, I mean, all the great labels from like '91 to '95 that I was following in those days. I was able to sort of piece together all the collection that I still have. That's pretty extensive physical copies of all those labels. And in the early days of Rising High Records, I started seeing James Bernard under other aliases. He recorded under Influx, which was more his techno and trance side, and then he also did Cybertracks, and Cybertracks was sort of his acid and maybe a little bit of ambient. And then, so I was getting those early 12 inches, and then all of a sudden, his first album under his own name came out, and this was his more um, ambient music. And then, of course, he went on to Isoflux Records in the middle '90s, and then sort of disappeared for a little bit. And it was an interesting story back in like 2005 or 2006, I think it was, that he actually showed up on Discogs in the forum, and we all were really excited to have James Bernard be part of our be part of the forums back then. We had a lot of influential artists be part of Discogs community back in the forum days, like Frankie Bones and Adam X, Dave Clark, Martin Vandervluten. Did I say Adam X? Max Dooley, David Morley, I think was also had a showing on there. And then there were some other ones, that I didn't know so well, but I'm definitely blanking on some really important ones for those. But we had a really strong community, and it was really exciting seeing some of our heroes be part of our forum. And we struck up a good conversation, back then. And James, I think, was really taken back by the amount of old school people that were on there that enjoyed his music and really appreciate his music, and so much so that he ended up going back through his DAC collection and sourcing together these 3 disc CD sets of all of his early Influx music, all of his early unreleased music, and all of his Cybertracks releases. 3 disc sets of all three, so in a total of 9 CDs. And then it also really inspired him to, I think, sort of around that time, start to make new albums with Inner Peace and New Life around those 2 records around 2009, 2010. And then he really picked up speed in the teens. And but through all that time, I got a chance to strike up a really good friendship with James, and we still talk occasionally and share emails. And I was talking to him in 2000, I think it was 18 or so, and I kind of introduced him to um, Ryan Griffin at A Strange Isolated Place Records. And, they hit it off, and they started releasing music together, and I was like so happy. And then I started up my own label in 2020, and I was like, oh man, I wish I would have released what Ryan, came out with, because he came out with all those unreleased box sets of some of the best tracks of those, and he came out with 2 really nice 4x12 compilations of all that music, and he did a great job with it. Probably even a better job than what I would have done, as far as just the physical. He just did a great job with the packaging, and I was kind of green at the time, and I still feel a little green, and he does a great job on his label. I definitely aspire to be as good as his label and some other ones out there, like the one they reissued on past, present, and future records. They do a great job as well. There's probably two of the most strongest reissue labels in the past 10 or 15 years, especially in ambient music and techno and stuff like that. And it was really cool back in the day. It was a really special moment because James was going through a difficult time at the time, and I told him a little bit about my history with having a stillborn baby and stuff like that, and we definitely connected on that level, and he was really appreciative maybe of my friendship and stuff like that, and probably one of the biggest honors that I've ever had is he actually wrote a song uh, for my situation and just in general. It helped inspire him, and he wrote a song called "A Warm Place." And I still remember that feeling of my hero writing a song based on a story that, based on my background and what I experienced, and sharing it with him, who was going through a difficult time as well with that. Not to share his business at the time, but you know what I mean. Like he had a difficult time with a childbirth, and it was just it was right. It was one of the most special, most touching, most probably the best things I've ever been involved in being music, and that kind of was kind of like the one of the first examples of me sort of coming into touch with one of my favorite artists of all times and sort of trying to see what I could help them with, or see what I could do for them, or see how I could help share their music, or see how I could um, gain them some new fans. So we just always stayed in touch, and hopefully, he appreciated me getting him in touch with Ryan at the time, and they've had a good relationship over the time in releasing music, and he even gave me a shout out on one of the records on the back, and which was really nice, and we've always stayed in touch. And it was funny when I heard that they were gonna. I had been thinking in the back of my mind. I guess when I started my label, I always thought of three labels that I thought I wouldn't ever touch when it comes to reissues, and it was for various reasons. One was Rising High, was because Casper Pound passed away, and I felt like there was enough copies of his records, even though they're not best quality sounding records, and I felt like the prices weren't very high, and there's a lot out there. There's a lot of copies out there. It's still, but it's more because of Casper Pound passed away, and I was kind of maybe at the time feeling like it wasn't the right thing to try to reissue some of the Rising High stuff. Also, Emit Records, because of the artwork and trying to get approval for that, and things like that. So I didn't really want to touch Emit. Plus, it was a CD only format, and I was wanted to do vinyl. So that was kind of off limits. And then the third and last one was Apollo Records, because for whatever reason Renat and Apollo Records just don't want to share their rights and let people reissue their music, even though they're not. And I digress by getting into that. It's very disappointing. Uh, I could go on and on about that. But so those are my three reasons why I didn't want to do three of my most important labels for my youth and doing reissues for various reasons. But Atmospherics was always kind of in the back of my mind, and I knew somebody would reissue it. And here and then I've been in contact with James in the last couple of years, and we kind of would talk about certain music that was released of his, or just kind of share some information about people that we knew in the community or something like that, and just different things we would kind of talk about, just touch base, and I would just see how he was doing. And so I saw that they were going to reissue Atmospherics on cassette and CD, and so as soon as I saw that, which was I think probably like a month or so late, excuse me, after it came out, probably in like October last year, 2024, I called him up, I inquired. I texted him, and I was like, Atmospherics, and it's funny because I was gonna message him about it, and he told me that Atmospherics. Maybe he told me, or I found out that or looked again that Atmospherics wasn't. if it was going to be released on vinyl, I saw, oh, they're doing it on a 4x12. Okay, well, I missed my opportunity, but it's all good. I texted him back. I was like, it's not a big deal. Just let me know where I can get a copy, and I bought a copy. Not a big deal. As long as it comes out, that's what's important. I don't care whether I do it or somebody else do it, but as long as it is fresh copies, get into the scenes so people can, younger kids can buy them, and people that can didn't know about it at the time can now appreciate it and buy a nice copy. And that's why reissue labels are out there, so we can do that for people. And since this has been done, me and James, I've been kind of throwing around other things to reissue by him, and because I would love to have him on my label. He's always been super important and a great guy. And so I figure we're gonna. I was kind of thinking like what to reissue, and I did get James Bernard's the 4x12 2 weeks ago in the mail, and so it had been sitting here, and I figure why not, let's review it. I haven't really gone to too much 90s music yet, really, for the most part through this channel the last 6 months. I've been focusing on new wave music and here and there, and now starting to get in some newer dub techno and some other releases. So what could be a better release to touch on for one of the first I'm doing in my heyday of the early 90s, and some of my most beloved records is to start with Atmospherics. Um, but now that I think about actually like reviewing it and giving it a score, it's gonna be interesting. And I would probably say it's gonna be in the low 80s. Definitely a classic of early 90s electronic music and ambient music. But I know there's a few tracks that I'm probably gonna score a 9, but there might be a few tracks in there where I get like a 6 or 7, a good to very good. So we'll see where it sort of ends up. But I'm excited to review it and listen to it in full for the first time in a few years. And it's always a record that I pull out, or again, or the CD, and pull it out and add something to some sort of like mix that I'm doing, and because it just creates such a great ambience. And I often use the track called Mars. Is it called Mars FM or Mars? Mars Rain. That's right. Um, I was thinking Mars FM, the old uh, Los Angeles radio station for some reason. But Mars Rain is always a track that I enjoy playing because it's such a cool atmosphere. It sounds like it's maybe I should wait till I get to the track, but it just sounds like you're on Mars and there's like some like acid rain coming down, and it's just really very moody, and it's just a great atmospheric builder. And I always like playing that track in chill out releases. But yeah, we're gonna check out the first track, which is I don't know if you pronounce it Oof, Euf. It's EUPH. So I'm not sure how to pronounce it, but let's check it out and play it, and then we'll review every track, and then I'll review every album. If you're interested in having me review something, just there's an email below. Just contact me if you're interested in me reviewing anything, as far as if it's your own music or somebody else's, or even if it's Depeche Mode or what have you. All right, well, let's check out Oof. Is it Oof? I've never heard anybody pronounce it. Maybe I'll search it and see what's up. All right, let's check it out. All right, so that was track number one, called Youth. Just to correct the mistake I made on the label name. The label's name is Past Inside the Present. I was getting confused with another label that I also follow. Um, so track number one, Youth. At the time, there was quite a few Rising High compilations that came out. I actually have them over there. I can't remember which I think it might have been Futurescape or that Youth and Phosphorus. Both those tracks from this album I had heard originally on a compilation before, on a Rising High compilation before I bought this album. I think I bought the CD in probably like 90, maybe 95 or 96, and I'd heard those two tracks back in 94, I guess, when this album came out. And so those two have always been really special tracks for me in the history of ambient music in the early 90s. So it's really interesting, like reviewing it 30 years later. One thing is the great tones in this as the song fades in and it's so gentle and but it's so spacey at the same time and it becomes very futuristic. And there's one thing I always really liked about James Bernard's ambient music, and it very much reminds me of like Dominic Woozy's uh, ambient music also. There's always like a scientific level, a scientific sound in there that sort of sounds like elements are forming and atoms are forming and evolving, and it seems to be such like the way things evolve almost seems scientific sometimes, and like there's like it's maybe not like a human actually doing it sometimes, although there's a lot of human emotion in it. It feels like it's a little bit it's almost hard to explain because it's analog music and it's trying to sound maybe it's sort of trying to sound maybe scientific would be sort of perfect, but they're doing it with analog equipment. So there is a lot of emotion in there and human emotion, but it always kind of feels like me there's a lot of like scientific evolution in the tracks, and maybe it's some of the sounds are sort of um, kind of very science fiction in some ways too. So it sounds a little bit scientific. Also, it's not just your normal maybe organic spacey music, but more like spacey music. And it seems like there's always like a level of like a vintage sound in there, and again scientific. It's almost really hard to subscribe. I mean to describe, but all I can say is it seems like he's definitely inspired by science fiction, and that might be the easiest way to say it. But it definitely always feels like there's something, and it's almost like looking at nature in a scientific way. Like when I think of like Mars Rain that comes up, it's very sci-fi, like reading a book from like the 50s or something about like sci-fi space journey or something like that. And this is the soundtrack for it. Youth is a really great. It just brings back so many memories back then. And one thing that I really like too is as the early '90s progressed, there was a lot of interest in Eastern sounding music and different influences of different countries sort of put into a Western music. You think of like Enigma or Sweet Lullaby or Bedouin monks or what have you. There's a lot of delirium. There's a lot of Eastern sort of sounding down tempo and ambient music. And the great thing about James Bernard is here there's a little bit of a sort of a Eastern sounding sound that sort of comes in and it sounds a little bit mystical, but it never goes overboard. Like James Bernard has always been very consistent about keeping things tempered and never going overboard with anything. The only thing he's ever gone on maybe on the extreme on is when he makes like acid music, and then there's like a heavy acid music. Or if it's hardcore or really harder techno, he goes more aggressive. But when it comes to like sounds and just of how tracks evolve. Like he never goes like overboard. The bass line at 245 is great. Drives through the whole track. Just a really, it's nice to hear just a deep bass note and not hear like a beat or anything else really percussion related for the most part. It's just just that heavy deep bass in there, and then the twinkling like dreamlike melody that floats over it is just magic and just brings together everything and just then you have the post rave kind of childlike voice that kind of fades out of the melody around 7 minutes and 20 seconds. It just kind of completes the track and puts it all in a nice capsule and in a nice post rave chill out feel. It's just a magical track. I give it 9 out of 10 stars. Why I don't give it 10 stars, I don't know. I guess it's hard for me to give tracks um, ten a perfect score unless they're like like Enjoy the Silence or Bizarre Love Triangle. Like there's certain pop songs that I feel like I can give 10, but sometimes it's almost really hard to give tracks a perfect score. But I don't see why I shouldn't with this one. But there's always room for better. I guess there's that's just critiquing music. I guess maybe the thing that I wouldn't give it a 10 for is maybe if I compared it to something else that I thought was a 10. Maybe there's just something out there. Like I can think of like a Rising High, like MLO. The track Windborn by MLO is probably my favorite Rising High ambient song of all time. If you know it, you know it. But Windborn is probably a 10. So in that respect, at least I can compare it to something that was came out roughly the same year, even on the same label. So if I compare it to that, maybe that would be a 10. So that's probably why I guess why I wouldn't give it a 10. But such a great song. I mean, 9 is such a strong score. 8 for me is a classic. 9 is a legendary track, and this track Youth is a legendary track in early 90s electronic music, ambient music, space music, all that stuff. So yeah, let's go on to track number 2 called Complete Nonsense.
kind of nonsense is this? Nonsense? You call it nonsense? When your own companions are stricken before your very eyes? When suddenly they are dead? For no reason? For no cause?
All right, so that was track number two called Complete Nonsense. This one's definitely unsettling, eerie. In some ways, it kind of reminds me a lot of 70s ambient music, 70s space ambient music. And I guess probably the difference between 70s space ambient and sort of 90s is in the early 90s, it's kind of like a post rave. So a lot of the sounds that sort of came out um, have something that generally is a little bit inspired by techno. I feel like, or and here you and just more of a repetitive, maybe rhythm based or what have you. But you can sort of hear in the sound what it is repeating. It goes on for quite a bit and evolves and really set kind of helps the eeriness of the track and kind of that feeling of like being lost or in space or that feeling of uneasiness. Um, Definitely feels like a space journey in here. It's around 6:20, 6 minutes 20 seconds. The deeper part of the melody sort of comes out, and the guitar parts, it sounds like an acoustic guitar, sort of doom, doom, doom. It kind of reminds me of like some of Brian Eno's, like sort of like Land. It reminds me a little bit like Music for Airports, a little bit just some basic tones in there to sort of support the ambience. And really nice track, really good track as well. I give this track 7 stars out of 10. Um, it's interesting from a time length. Obviously, it's more important of the flow than the time length, but as far as like a vinyl time length, it's strange to put two 10-minute tracks in a row when there could have been opportunities in the album to sort of maybe split these up so the time order would be a little bit closer. But I guess as a flow on more like a CD, that makes sense. But maybe on a vinyl, like maybe it could have been done a little differently and sort of that could have been like a track later on in the album. Possibly, maybe there was a different, maybe a little. This track could have been a little bit better placed on the album. It's just a thought. I don't know if that's true or not, but considering this is two tracks in a row that are 10 minutes plus ambient, I feel like maybe this could have been a nice, a really good track to sort of end the album with, or maybe start the second vinyl disc instead of just being the second track on there. Because you get lost in this track, and then the last one is very already after through two tracks. It's very sprawling space ambient, and maybe it would have been nice to kind of break those up a little bit so the album kind of flows a little bit. But just a thought. But I don't know if that's necessarily true until I remember all the tracks and I sort of would place them in order. But that's kind of the first thing that kind of comes to mind is like putting two 10-minute plus tracks on the same side on vinyl. Even back in 1994 would have been a little bit, maybe it would have been an opportunity to flip them up or spread them out because of just the fidelity on records in general. But, um, you know, putting over 21 minutes on a side of vinyl, not everybody thought about those things in the 80s and 90s. That's for sure. But yeah, 7 out of 10 stars. I give it. It's a very good track on the low side of very good. Let's check. Let's check out track number three called Helix.
Except the curse.
right, so that was Helix. Again, on this track, it sort of has that science fiction sort of spacey sounding. There's a little bit bleepy in here, kind of odd space sounds, a little bit more tribal, a little bit more ancient sounding. The bass notes are really nice. The melody is a little bit more optimistical in this track, maybe a little bit more straightforward, more direct. A really nice track as well. I mean, I feel like I'm going to be repeating myself saying that's a really good track, but um, I give that one 7.5 stars. Really nice stuff. Nice floaty, atmospheric track. Very spacey. Goes great with the artwork as well, and just the overall theme of atmospherics. And it really, it's been a few years since I've heard this album, and it's definitely giving me a lot of '70s vibes as far as like spacey ambient um, albums and music, and probably just because I went through like a big a big period of reviewing '70s ambient music, but this one definitely gives me that pacing and I think why I like '90s music, space music so much, even more than '70s music, even though I love that too. It's just there's a minimalism in here and a little bit more of a less meandering feeling of the music. '70s is a little bit more meandering, and then it sometimes in '70s music there's a more of a feeling of music to do things and not being as experimental and as ambient and minimalistic as this. And here, I mean, James and probably just in general, a lot of early '90s artists aren't afraid to just let tones go on for minutes and minutes and just very slowly evolve. And that's why I like '90s music, especially. It seems like from the '70s, ambient music is was fairly for the most part kind of experimental, and then '80s it kind of got in a little bit of new age and stuff. Maybe lost a little bit of direction, but there's still some good organic and sort of being tied with classical music and maybe nature and different things really kind of inspire ambient music in the '80s. But when '90s came out and rave music and post rave and the chill out scene and stuff seemed to really fine tune ambient music to where it really maybe for the first time the space music made sense in a different, more unique way. And I think it instead of just being spacey music for like laseriums or planetariums and things like that, or maybe just space opera in general, like it feels like these songs have a different reason for why they are, and a different maybe a different angle or a different purpose, or just just to make people chill out and sort of uh I guess really sort of take them there in space music versus it just being like a representation of space music. Or I guess maybe in the '70s it was more pie in the sky, like this is space music, where here is a great example of it really putting you in the element and making you feel like you're lost and sort of um, just being part of the space junk and floating about and taking everything in and just at the same time it feeling like it's very um, I wouldn't say um, momentous, but just bigger picture. Like it just kind of almost feels like there's a deeper meaning to a lot of the ambient music in the '90s versus the '70s. Really good track though. I really enjoyed it. 7.5 stars. Definitely a strong song on the album. And let's go on to track number 4 called Phosphorus. Definitely, this one's gonna be a classic for sure.
most difficult thing I've ever tried to do is to clear the mind. most difficult thing I've ever tried to do is to clear the mind.
All right, so that was Phosphorus. After hearing these last four tracks in a row, I kind of take my thought back about maybe this could have been in a different order. When I got to the track number two called "Complete Nonsense," I was thinking maybe it'd be different to sort of put that later in the album, knowing from a time perspective and a little bit of the flow, if I remember correctly. But I can see how the evolution of rhythm within the space music and ambient music makes sense because it kind of hinted at it last, and then even you for the very beginning just kind of just some bass notes, and then this one's probably the most rhythmic, like almost full without really having a beat of the track so far. So it seems to like the track sort of evolved to that point in a way. And this one's a little bit more aggressive. Sort of also has the same sort of childlike voice that's in at the end of Youth. This one sort of adds a little bit of a acid growl in the sequencing melody as well, and it kind of grows. But really a nice track, fits in great with the album as well. And after you hear like two different voices, and that really kind of ties back to like the raviness post rave of it, and also a little bit of the dreamlike feel, and almost like it's a little bit like a memory. Whenever you hear like any kind of like child voice within like deep music, it kind of makes you sort of have memories of when you were a kid and stuff like that, and it brings like a childlike element to it. And this one has a little bit like that too, even though it's not fully a childlike melody. It definitely kind of brings in that feeling. So we're gonna go on to track number five called "Mars Rain." This is the first song of third the third sided record, or C1 as you'd say on when sequencing an album. All right, let's check out "Mars Rain." Oh, Phosphorus, 8 out of 10 stars. Very good track. All right, so that was the track number 5 called Mars Rain. Um, it's a really good track for. It sounds like you're on like a space mission. It's very eerie. There's some of the melodies that sort of sound like maybe as if they were like just like almost like meteors just kind of going across the sky or something. Just a great sci-fi eerie. It makes you feel a little bit alone. You know, it's a little bit daunting. I mean, imagine being on Mars and then on top of it is it's sort of lightly raining or something like that too. It's just so visual and it just really kind of like puts you in the storyline. And it's just always been a favorite of mine to play when I mix kind of spacey or ambient music. I did a mix a few years ago. It was about a mission to Mars, and it was really evolved around this track because it was called Mars Rain. And so I maybe I'll put a link in the bottom, or maybe one of these days I'll upload some of my mixes to this site. But might get lost in all of it, but who cares? But yeah, it's basically about a trip to Mars, and through the different stages and the different feelings of going to a different planet. That kind of comes from my like when I was a kid. We used to grow up I grew up in Los Angeles, so we had like Disneyland and things like that, and Space Mountain was always a great ambiance for the ride, and I always really loved the People Mover. If you guys remember the People Mover, it used to go through like Tron, and then there was like that sci-fi uh, telescope thing, and that was like that kind of evolved a few different times. But at one point, it was kind of a sci-fi story with it. But People Mover kind of went through Tron, the original Tron, when that opened up, and just the ride itself, and going through Tomorrowland, and then Space Mountain. Like this sounds like it reminds me of People Mover back in those days. And there's actually a website that you can kind of hear some of the music that was on the original um, Space Mountain ride is the background music. If you guys have ever been to Space Mountain, and the original music was some of the coolest like sort of space music, and when I was a kid, and we're talking like 1982, 83, like when I was like maybe like 6 or 7, 8, stuff like that. Like I loved going that ride because it just puts you in such anticipation of going to another planet, and just the whole ride was amazing. Especially as you got older, the ride got kind of seemed to go smaller. But when you were a kid, like that ride was so. And of course, in the dark, it felt like you were faster, and you had you know flying meteorites and meteors and stuff like that, and it's just a great ride, and just the whole ambience of you being on the spaceship, and sound effects, and just all these like sounds, and sort of talking around like the space mission stuff. Just kind of set my imagination on fire, and as I kind of got through electronic music, through the 80s and 90s, I always kind of wanted to find music that was like that, and Mars Rain always like fit that exact description. And so I give the track an 8 out of 10. It's just it doesn't do too much, but it creates such an ambience that it's not really like your typical ambient track of the day. It's it's in a strange way, it's almost like nature music for space. So like if you did a field recording for the out in the field, it would sort of sound like a field, right? So this is like field recording inside of space. I feel like, because it captures the atmosphere of Mars like perfectly, and it's not so much like a song about Mars. It's just putting you in that ambience of Mars, and there's really no other track quite like it in those days. I remember. Um, so yeah, strong track, 8 out of 10. I thought in between the next few songs I'd kind of show a little bit of my James Bernard music when I was growing up, and I thought I'd just kind of highlight a few of those. Um, Here's one of his first Cybertracks songs for a rainy day. Um, Always really loved this one. Journey to the Center of the Mind, Alchemy. It's great tracks. Really always loved that Rising High. A little bit later on, they switched to in Rising High switched to these models. This was around like 95, 96. So probably maybe his last EP on Rising High, Influx, Far From Falling. Um, Also, of course, the double pack, which I'm considering reissuing. Me and James talked a little bit about that. He's remastered this in recent weeks, and I might reissue this double pack. This is on Safro Records, which is almost like a offshoot of. For me, it felt like an offshoot of uh, of Rising High in some ways, but maybe it was. Like I can't remember. It's just the artwork always reminded me of it. But I just recently, probably last year, I had a second pack of this. I sold it to a friend, and then of course later on, 97, he was on Safro with Influx, and then yeah, just kind of showing some other stuff. Uh, this was Symphony for Biomechanical Breakdowns, which is really this was the second album of under James Bernard after Atmospherics, and this one is a very interesting album, and it's very well done. But it takes you for a loop if you're expecting like warmer ambient. Like this one, it's a great name for it, Symphony for Mechanical Breakdown, because this one's a lot more abrasive than you would think after that. Um, I kind of talked a little bit about the James Bernard compilations back he did in the day. He did 25 of these back in 2006, for people at Discogs, and he kindly signed them. Thankfully, I really respected him. He gave me the first copies of them, so that was really cool. Number one of 25, and this had basically these three. Then became the makeup for the reissue or the pressing on vinyl. And these were interesting CDs. A lot of these from people, these black CDs, kind of didn't work that well after a few years. Just the type of CDRs they work on. It's been a few years since I played them, but I don't play them that often because I know they're kind of fragile. And so that of course led to these two 4x12s that Strange Isolated Place did, aka Ryan Griffin. Label owner did these fantastic quadruple packs for it. I put the correlating sticker with them on here. That's not part of the artwork. I just put that on the outside of the packs. But just fantastic job from Ryan on doing these. Just amazing. I felt like I definitely missed it. I think if there's anything I regret that I didn't reissue, is probably these. And again, this sort of comes from the original CDRs he sent us. Also, you have the Influx ones too, which was a triple pack. He signed these as well. I think these are, number one and number 25 of that one. It's kind of hard to see on there, but I mean, when he went through all his DATs and put these out, we were just like so excited to get all this great music, unreleased stuff from one of my favorite artists. I was just like blown away. It was awesome to get that in the mail. I remember that. I've recently I've misplaced my Cybertracks triple disc, which is the EPs of Cybertracks and Influx just on digital form. Now I do have them on vinyl, so it's not a big deal. But I've just misplaced them, and I couldn't find them when I was looking for this video. But and there's a couple records I misplaced too that I need to find. So obviously you have a lot of music, but some of his EPs he did in the later '90s. I mean later 2000s. So Destruct. There was also Construct, and then there was Flashback. I'm missing my construct. I think it was about like maybe like 6 or 7 years ago. James asked me if I could send these to him because he did not have he didn't have version he didn't have copies of this, and so I sent it to him, and I think he might have lost my construct because I never got it back, but um, maybe not. Maybe I lost it, but I thought it was somewhere around that time because I was like, I think he had asked me for it, and I was like, I thought I sent it to you, but maybe I lost it. I don't know, but I feel like I don't know. Sorry, James, if you're watching this, but I don't know if I got him back if uh, or if I lost it. But I thought I sent them all to you, but maybe not. Maybe not. I can't remember. But hopefully, maybe sometime you can make me if you're watching, make me a CDR of that. And then also these very underrated albums that were only on CDR from 2009 and 2010. New Life and Inner Peace. Some fantastic IDM and techno on here. I did some reviews online of these as well. Um, these are ones I'm thinking about reissuing too. Um, I would love to do these for James. Here's I think this came out in 2017. Fragments is one of his newer ones. Really good ambient stuff. Um, yeah, and then I'll come back and I guess touch on some of my original compilations where I first heard James' music. But let's go into Lost in It, which is track number 6. right, that was track number 6, "Lost in It." Um, this one's it's as this album has kind of progressed, it's kind of gotten to the point where this kind of seems like the epic kind of pinnacle, almost tragic. It's powerful. It's got that haunting melody through it, deep rolling bass, and then just kind of ends with a flourish of sequenced acid, just kind of winding itself down. Um, it's just really a haunting track and very very spacey and very powerful. And I give it 7.5 tracks. It's right in between very good and classic for me. It's definitely another favorite on here. Just so far, not a track under 7. So all very good and up. Just wanted to show some of the early compilations that I had some James Bernard music on that kind of got me into buying his music. Um, Secret Life of Trance. I think his a track called Illusions was on here, or Emotions by Influx. Yeah. Um, Funny, like going back and seeing some of my old cassettes. Um, Secret Life of Trance. The Fluxer was on here. This was like the Planet. This is the American, the USA edition of the Secret Life of Trance, which was also, I believe, this version in some ways, because also has this one has Brain Eater on here, but maybe I'm mistaking the other one. I thought this one has an Influx on. This one has Brain Eater on here, and then also oh, I thought I had 2 tracks on here. Anyways, this is the first Secret Life of Trance, and then later on they put this one on. This one, Flexor, might be on the other Secret Life of Trance, but just an amazing compilation back in the day. I mean, to be an American producer and be on here with Wolfgang Voigt, Haiku was on here, Hard Floor, Oliver Lieb, Pete Namlook, Adam Hart, DJ Fios, or trying to remember his original name, Pascal D. Fios. I always forget how to pronounce his name. Um, Also on here, Irresistible Force, Mixmaster Morris on here. Sven Vath is on here. Casper Pound. Black Dog is on here. I mean, to be the only American producer on this album is just a landmark feat for 1993. Just an amazing early career that James Bernard put up right away. Um, Here's I think Secret Life of Volume 2. This was a 4-pack, it's a gatefold. This one had a Cybertech's Journey to the Center of the Mind, which was on that EP, and then it also started off with Flexor. So yeah, Flexor was on here as well, and they kind of came from Volume 2 and this. So just an awesome box set. And then also he was also had a track on Part 4, which was also a 4-disc set. He had a track called Falling All Day, which came, of course, from the Falling All Day EP. I think this was the last Secret Life of Trance. Of course, he had Futurescape from Rising High. I think this is still the first place where I heard Youth and Phosphorus back in early '94. I do have a couple different copies of this. As you can see, I got 2 copies of the white, and there's another black one in here. But I think I have another copy of this in my loose CD bin. And also have 2 copies of Trance Injection, which was another great Rising High EP. This one had Cybertrucks Drifting Through the Galaxy. And also, I think it had one more track. Yeah, Influx Tiny Green Spots. And then also had Influx, of course, VS 128, which was my favorite early James Bernard track. Um, I remember this. This is one of my favorite double CDs back in '94 when I was a senior in high school. Such an amazing compilation in here. There's such good tracks on here. Such amazing tracks in here. Perry and it's some of the best early Rising High tracks in my opinion. OBX is on here. Eternal Prayer. Perry and Rodin. The beat goes on straight on and on. RD1's Eclipse, which is Resistant D, is one of my favorite trance tracks of all time. Transforms tracks on here. Syzygy's on here. Tranquilizer with the Tranquilizer track is on here, which I also have the promo version in my. There's so many records from these days that I ended up, so many tracks from these compilations that I ended up getting later. Bilal's tracks is on here. Another Dreamfish on here from Fax. Sequential, Everything is Under Control, which is one of my favorite trance artists. Sequential did The Prophet, did Mars, Saturn Cruising. He did um, Everything is Under Control here. Mission to Mars. Oh my, it's just so many great tracks he did. And then New London School of Electronics is on here. Rainforest, just which I have two copies of. It's probably one of my favorite chill out records that Rising High ever put out. Flying High is on here from his Irresistible Force, which is my favorite track from his first two Irresistible Force records. I mean, just an amazing. Every time there was one time where I probably had 4 or 5 copies of this, and I had it on cassette because this was such an influential compilation for me, as was Futurescape. Just some amazing compilations back then. So I just wanted to show those while I was having a Bernard celebration here in this video of his early music, and just some amazing compilations there. Just can't tell you how groundbreaking those were for me personally when I was 17 and 18 years old. So we're going to go on to track number 7 called FM, which starts the D side, track D1 for the vinyl. All right, so that was track number 7 called FM. This one evolves really nicely out of the last track called Lost in It. It's kind of peaceful, a little bit new agey, um, nice and gentle. It almost sounds a little bit oriental because it kind of sounds like a wind instrument, and it kind of puts you like in a field or something like that, or it's a little bit. It definitely draws upon some memories in some way. It's kind of relaxing and kind of tranquil, but just another really really nice track. 7.5 stars out of 10. Another track in between very good and classic for ambient music. Um, so this album is definitely pacing where I thought it might be in the low 80s is like an all time classic for the genre of ambient music and specifically early 90s electronic music. Let's go on to the track number 8 called Odyssey. All right, that was track number 8 called Odyssey, um, which is roughly actually the longest track on the album. This one is probably, to me, is like the most movie-like track on here. It's really well paced, cinematic, um, kind of a backdrop to a story, kind of a combination of eerie and haunting and a little bit majestic. And the great thing about there's so many eerie tracks on this album, and when you think of like space in general, one of the most emotions that I kind of feel is it being very eerie and because you're and it's also a very very alone. Like I think people don't think all the time think about the. I mean I do I think about it a lot because I like sci-fi and I like um, you know I just watch all kinds of science videos and stuff about um, the planets and moons and all kinds of different. I just read Wikipedia pages about like different planets and stuff. I just find it very interesting. And I think when you think about like space, you kind of think of a lot of different things, but I don't know if everybody really thinks of the emotions like what if they were in space. And one of the ones that is probably the most, is being alone. But not only that is just the eeriness of being alone and being in an alien place that doesn't really change too much. And there's so much like feeling like in some ways it's kind of amazing, and in some ways it's kind of daunting, in some ways it's kind of scary, in some ways it's kind of peaceful. And I mean, there's so much different emotions that one person might have by being in space. I just find it fascinating. And then also on top of that, you think of like traveling to different places and living in different places, and then you sort of factor in just the things that you would need to live, like food and air, and you know what I mean, like some sort of place to sleep, and you know what I mean. It's just kind of like all those kind of things, like on top of it, would just be daunting. But if you don't factor in those things and you just think about like going there and visiting there, even if it's just for a dream or for just you're reading a book or you're just putting yourself in an element, like when you're listening to a song like this and you just put yourself in it, it 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 still brings up all those kind of emotions of like being alone and maybe being scared or also feeling like it's like something bigger, right? It's like the universe. I mean, it's forming. You know what I mean? Just it makes you feel so insignificant, and just the power of space and all the things in outer space is just it's just mind-boggling. Just the scientific part about it, the physics and everything involved, plus other dimensions and everything. That's why sci-fi really kind of makes people's imaginations just run wild because there's so much unknown out there, and then you tie your emotions into it. And Odyssey, I feel like Odyssey does a great job of being sort of all that wrapped into one, and sort of being like that movie setting of a background to some kind of amazing sci-fi adventure. And if sort of feeling like you're coming to some sort of conclusion in the movie is what the track makes me feel like. Another really good track, 7.25 stars. And so we're gonna go on to the last track, Genetic Experiment, and then I'll wrap up with my overall thoughts on the album.
I'm afraid.
My mind is growing. There is no question about it. I can feel it. I can feel it. I can feel it. I'm afraid. Good afternoon, gentlemen.
All right, so that was a genetic experiment. Last track. It's just a little bit over 3 minutes, 3 minutes and 9 seconds. It's definitely got some great sounds in there. Of course, can never go wrong with 2001 movie samples of Hal. Gotta love Hal. I always forget what's the name in 2010. The next, is it Sal? Because it was a girl, or was it Val? I want to say it was Sal, but then Sal sort of sounds like a girl. Was it Sally? Maybe it was Sally, but it was short for Sal. Anyways, I love 2010 as well. Just I wish they would bring out a sequel to that, or a prequel, or relaunch of all the movies they relaunched. I mean, can you please relaunch 2001 and 2010? So it'd be great not seeing something like that. It would be great versus seeing some another Superman remake. Um, Anyways, uh, really strong ending to the album. I think this would be a good opening to the album as well. But "Youth" is such a great track. It's my favorite track on the album. I don't blame it that starts out with it because it's a great intro. But I do think this could be a nice intro. I'd be curious to ask James if after the fact if he thought this album would go better in a different order of the tracks. I feel like there is kind of some opportunity for. Well, I mean, there's so many good tracks, and they lead into each other in different ways. Um, there could be I mean, multitude of different ways you could sort of make the album flow in a different way because of the tracks. I don't know if there's any better way specifically, but I'd wonder if James would think after the fact, um, if there was a better way to segue these tracks. Um, my overall thoughts of the album, the I talked a little bit about in the last break, but just the feeling of aloneness in this album and awe, and it's also the mystery of space, the exploration of it, but also there's like a feeling of movement through a lot of the tracks because there is some rhythm in it, and it's not just space music. It in some ways it honors 70s space music and then also brings it into the 90s in a post rave way, adds rhythm, a little bit of um, a little bit of acid lines in there, a little bit of techno in there. Um, but it's almost like a combination of exploration, landscape music, and then also kind of an atmospheric, kind of all combines all of those together in one great album. And then you add some movie samples, some voices here and there, and some deep bass notes. It really works well in all the frequencies and all the moods that you might encounter in space and exploration of space. And the album does a great job of taking all those pieces into one really great album for the time. When I add up the total of the stars, it comes to 69 divided by 9, so it's a 7.66, so it's roughly around 76, 77 out of 100. I think if you take out the last track was just an outro, I think it's a little bit more accurate with 62 and three quarter stars divided by 8, which is a 7.84. So I feel like that's a little bit closer, but I think considering all the things it does, and especially it feeling like it's a combination of exploration and landscape, and like the tracks Mars Rain, and then there's a feeling of being like in a movie, and there's so many different feelings of or applications of space music in this album that I really feel like giving it an extra points and putting it into the excellent category. So considering it was a 7.84 without the last track, so roughly a 78 or 79, I gave it 3 extra points and brought it into the excellent category for the genre. 82 out of 100. Definitely belongs. I feel like it belongs in my 80 range and above for being a classic of 90s electronic music, and specifically space music, ambient music, and chill out music. Just a fantastic, almost near legendary album for the time, and it's still growing as we go on 30 years now, and being celebrated with this really nice reissue that Past Inside the Present did on this. Just a fantastic job on this. Unfortunately, there's only 200 copies of this right now, but I'm sure they'll make some more. I mean, how could you not? The demand will be there, I think. Maybe that's the only thing I possibly think about, like this reissue. Every packaging and everything's done. I think it's going to be really cool to hear the bonus 2 disc of BV Dub, the ambient dub and dub techno producer, doing his own versions of the track is a nice touch for this. In some respects, it's kind of a new way to do a reissue, because not only are you honoring the original reissue and keeping the track list and the time on each side the same, but then you're also releasing in conjunction with it almost an updated version, but not by the original artist, but by somebody who really enjoyed it originally, and it was influenced by that. And that's a really exciting. That's something I haven't seen necessarily in a vinyl package do that when it comes to some of the most important 90s projects that I've seen come out. So just a really fantastic job by Past Inside the Present on this reissue, and such a worthy reissue, and to do it on the 30th anniversary of it just makes it even more special. But yeah, fantastic record. Hopefully you guys enjoyed it if you guys have never heard it. Curious what your thoughts are and what your score would be on this album. Out of 100 using my scoring system. Again, an 82 out of 100. If you'd like me to review something from you, or anything in general about electronic music, just email me below. My contact email is below, and I'd be happy to talk with you about reissuing something that you have suggested for me. I'd be curious to do that for you. All right, thanks so much.
Went